Good evening, everyone, and welcome to day 2 of our Getting Started with Salesforce Service Cloud. Today, we're going to be looking into implementation strategies. As you'll have noticed, I'm following the Salesforce curriculum for the Service Cloud Consultant, and you can get that from the trailhead, or you can just Google Service Cloud Exam Guide for Salesforce. So if you're interested in the exam, you would see the guide according to what Salesforce recommends for this certification. Okay, so this is what we did yesterday. Yesterday, we covered factors that influence key contact center metrics, the KPIs, and the business challenges you face during working as a Service Cloud consultant. And we also identified certain interaction channels. We did live chats, and we also saw compare different strategies or different ways which we can implement introduction to Service Cloud, different channels we can use when we're deploying Service Cloud into an hub. Okay, so today we are going to go further with the implementation strategies, and this is basically what Salesforce recommends for implementation strategy. It says, given a scenario, determine how to facilitate a successful consulting engagement. So you want to go through the process of initiating a project and the likes, and also giving a scenario, determine the appropriate contact center licenses. So that talks about what type of licenses would you recommend for your clients if they're going through a transformation project of implementing Salesforce Service Cloud in their businesses, okay? So again, I already explained what we're going to be covering in this session, and this is the agenda for today. So the agenda for today is we're going to discuss about the phases and activities of consulting projects. So typically, if you're working with a small business, you would need to understand how to approach a business. When you get to talk to a business, you need to know what you need to be discussing at the early stage. And in the mid of the project, you need to know how to communicate. In addition to that, you need to know the components of each of these phases, okay? And you need to understand implementation strategies. What are the types of strategies you are going to use to implement a project for the business, okay? If you're working with a large firm, chances are you wouldn't need to do all this because they would have a BA, they will have a PM, and they will have all those resources available, okay? The only thing there is you go as a consultant and fix problem. However, if you're working within a smaller organization, these are the things you need to be aware of, okay? Some of them might seem like a repetition because some of you might have other certifications like PMP, BA, CBAB, and the likes. However, according to Salesforce, we need to understand this, okay? And in addition to that, we're going to talk about deployment strategies. How do you deploy your changes into production? What are the recommendations? You know, as a consultant, you need to know whether you have to tell your customers to deploy immediately or you want to do a gradual process deployment, okay? And we're going to go through a case study whereby we're going to look into what Blackforce is currently facing and how we can solve Blackforce problem based on what we've learned so far. And in addition to that, today we're going to be doing a mock certification quiz whereby I'll just give you some of the questions that are likely to come up in your certification exam. If you're interested in writing your certification, then you can just quickly go through it and see that we are on track. Okay, so now let's go into phases of consulting projects. So basically, if you are hired, or I wouldn't say hired, I would say if you're an entrepreneur, if something you're interested is getting to talk to small businesses and trying to help them implement Service Cloud. One thing you need to know is that there are phases in projects. Again, you might have come across all these phases. Please try to understand that this is the Salesforce recommended approach to solving a consulting project, okay? And the first one is the planning stage. Every project starts with a planning stage whereby you gather requirements and you figure out what exactly you want to do, okay? Then you go to analysis of the project. So now that we know what to do, how do we go about it? Let's do some requirement gathering, analysis, trying to find out what exactly is the business needs, what are the gaps in the in the current business, and how you can improve based on those gaps you've observed. Then you go into design. Design is actually when you go on paper or you go on all those tools we have online, whereby you can sketch out your thought process and how you're going to approach this, okay? Then build is actually when you go on the hands-on hub. I said hands-on hub. When you actually go on the hub, the Salesforce hub itself, and you start building. We need to know the strategy for building, the strategy for deployment. Once you build, you validate. That's the testing phase, and you deploy, okay? Let's quickly go through details of this stuff. Phases and components of consulting projects. We have the planning stage. So what does it entail? What does the planning stage? What do you do in the planning stage? If you are going to be working as a consultant, and if you're a professional member of Blackforce, you will be given a project. And I would like you to approach this project that you're going to be given using this strategy, because this is you becoming a consultant. So I'm going to just give you a project. This is a current situation in Blackforce. We want to improve this project. And you will not follow the strategy of this training and tell me how you will plan and execute this project. So the planning phase is identify the reason for change. Why do we want to do this? You know, if you don't know why you want to do something, you wouldn't appreciate it when the thing is done. If you don't know if the stuff is going to be saving costs, or if you don't know if the stuff is going to be improving efficiency, you will not appreciate it when it's done. So why is very important. And why from the planning phase is purpose. Know the purpose of the project. Okay, so when you're given a project, don't just say, oh, this is what you're going to do, case assignment, queues, escalation. No, that's not what you're going to do. What you're going to do is find out the purpose. If you know the purpose, then you might think about other things that could solve it. Okay, scope. Now that you know the purpose of the project, know your scope. Don't tell me that you're a consultant because Blackforce want to do this, or your company want to do this, or you feel that you can do this, then you now start doing it. No, that's not the way to consult. Consult means that you know your limitation. You're being paid by the hour. So if it's going to take 2 hours to create an email template, then say, this is what we're doing. We are doing this email template, and this is what we're going to do. Deploy email template. No, you don't have to train users how to deploy email templates, or you don't have to teach them how to deploy email, how to create email templates. You create it for them and you're done. That's the scope of work. But if the scope involves training users how to use the email template, then make sure it is included in the scope. Scope is very important in consulting, because if you don't identify the scope, then you'll be making an assumption, or you'll be doing things that are not required, or you'll be doing things that you're not paid for. Okay, so when you, as a consultant, one thing you need to understand is that you find a purpose why you're doing the project. Then you talk about the scope. What are the limitations? What are the boundaries? Are we going to be touching code? Am I going to be writing Apex, or I'm going to be writing Flow? If I'm going to write in Flow, what type of flows am I writing? Would I be maintaining this project afterwards, or deploy and I leave? You need to know the scope, okay? Now, communication. How would you relate? How would you relate with the stakeholders? How would you communicate with the owners of this project? Do you speak directly to the CEO, or you speak to a BA, or you speak to a PM? You need to specify this is very crucial when you're working as a consultant, because the people that you relate with can determine whether the project can be successful or not. So identify those stakeholders. Even the users are your stakeholders, because the users might be the one testing the project. They might be the one validating what you've done. Okay, so try to understand that communication needs to be defined. Who are you going to be getting requirement from, and who makes the final? If at all there's something like called final decision, who makes the final decision? Who's approved requirement? Know who your stakeholders are and know how to communicate and understand the communication channels that you need to use. Okay, emails, phone, meetings. Some people prefer meetings because they have to record that session. Some people prefer emails because they have to document that session. But some people don't have, like for me, I don't like phone calls because phone calls just stop. I don't get a transcript of the phone call. And if you tell me that you said this, and there's no evidence of you saying that, then it becomes a problem. So try to communicate and use the right or effective communication channel to log the requirements. Now, roles and responsibility. When I give you a project, you'll be required to work as a team. Working as a team requires you to know who your roles or who the people are. What are their roles? Okay, you have a BA. What is exactly the job of a BA? Do you know what the BA is doing in this project? You have a resource. If the team members do not know what they're doing in the project, then the project is going to have a problem. So you need to understand the participants. Who are the key stakeholders which you already identified? Then try to understand the roles of those stakeholders. The user that will test your Salesforce org is also it needs to be identified. I need to say, this is a customer, and this customer will be testing the Salesforce org. This is a partner. This partner will be the one sponsoring and paying me. This is a BA. This is the person that gives me the requirement. You need to know the roles and responsibility of the people you are getting requirement from. Because if you don't know who the people are, if you don't know who is making the final decision, you're just there messing around. You're just there doing work that you might not get paid for. Okay? I've seen projects get abandoned because you're working out of scope. You don't know who to communicate to, and you don't know the roles and responsibilities of the people you're working with. Okay? There is what they call the internal team and the external team. Internal team is the people that you are working with. So for instance, if Black folks go to consult for an organization, if I carry Rosemary and Bumi and the likes to go and consult, that's Black folks internal team. But the people who meet there, they are the external team. Okay? And sometimes you might meet Salesforce in that meeting because Salesforce is also part of the stakeholders. Salesforce gives you that job. Salesforce will give you the consulting contract. And you go and consult for the small business, but stakeholders include Salesforce. So understand that you need to know the roles and responsibility of the key people in there and make sure that you know who to reach out to using the right communication channel. Okay? Change and training plan. A lot of people don't like change. If you work in a small business, obviously no one cares. If the CEO say, I want change, changes will be implemented. However, in a bigger organization like RBC, CIBC, and the likes, if someone say, I want to deploy a service cloud that would eliminate 50 jobs or 100 jobs, it's very hard. It's very hard to accept that change. So if you deploy a solution that no one is using, your project is dead, as good as dead. So you need to know how the change plan will work. How are you going to transit from the current design into the future design? You need to know the current state, the future state, and how you're going to transit into that. So if you're responsible for that, you need to know it and you need to put it into plan. So for instance, the change involves training. You want to train the user. You want to make sure that the user can use what you are designing, okay? Now we talk about project risks timeline. You need to know the risks involved. Look at, I know this stuff might seem basic to you, and you guys might have experienced this. However, it is important to know that there are risks in every project. You don't want to start a project because you're good, you're smart. No, you want to start a project because you can even see the end of that project. If you cannot visualize the end, if you cannot estimate how long it's going to take you to finish a project, why would you want to start? If there is no budget for a project, why would you want to start? So identify the possible risks. What are the possible risks of implementing a Salesforce? For instance, data. I want to import data from a legacy system into Salesforce. What are the possible risks? Bad data, inconsistency in data, real-time data getting lost in its legacy system while you are importing data into Salesforce. So how do you ensure that the real-time data will be getting into Salesforce the same day you're doing the imports? Data freezing time. There's what they call go live dates. And go live date is when you're now in sync with production. There's what they call freeze. I think it's freeze date, whereby you stop collecting data from legacy system and you're now officially using Salesforce. You need to understand those timelines. If you don't know when, if you don't know the project risk associated to your project, you will be I wouldn't say working in vain, but that could be a problem in your project. And also make sure you have a timeline. We have to do this in 2 weeks, in 4 weeks, in 4 months. If you realize that the resources wouldn't be available in 4 weeks, in 4 months, then don't take the project. Again, don't take project because you feel like you can do everything. Take the project because there is enough resources for that project. The risk has been identified and possible mitigation has been identified. Roles and responsibilities are being taken care of. If you don't have all this in place, do not start a project. So this is what they call the planning phase. Okay, now let's go to analyze. Now, when you've done with the planning, that's good. Now you've seen the problem, you know the why. When you get the why, you can now start identifying gaps between requirements and the project scope. So project scope says we want to be able to send email that is consistent. We don't want different operation teams to have different write-ups. Okay, I want to make sure that emails are received or sent 2 hours after getting the emails. That's the requirement. Scope. Okay, you want to know the scope. What are the scope? The scope could be, okay, you don't have, the only assets you get is customer support profile and the email template. You have to use a specific email template. You cannot create your own email template. Number 2, you could come up with so many things such as, okay, I need a feature license to enable me to create a campaign, but I need a feature license to enable me to create campaign. The requirement is we need to be able to send campaign to our users. Okay, I need a feature license. If you don't have a feature license, how would you be able to create a campaign? So understand the current gaps and understand if the requirements and the scope are in alignment. You need to understand if the requirements of what you're analyzing and the project scope are in alignment. If you're gathering requirements and it's outside of the project scope, or if the project scope and the requirements are not in alignment, then you cannot finish the project. This is where your analysis comes in. As a consultant, you need to know that you need a type of license in order to do certain things. So don't just accept the project and the business says there is not enough budget for buying this license. What about you designing this stuff in hands-on org and you now want to deploy it into their org? It cannot be done because you do not identify the gaps. Prioritize requirements. By prioritizing requirements, you want to find out what matters to the business and how you can execute the project. You don't want to start with the end task before the beginning of the task. For instance, I want to be able to receive or create a case from an email. In order to create a case from an email, you need to enable email to case. So you don't want to say, I want to be able, you don't want to start creating emails and creating assignment rules and everything without even enabling email to case. So you want to say the first task is enable email to case. The second task is configure the routing address. The third task is create email templates. So you want to prioritize which of the requirement comes first. Okay, then you get a sign off. This is the most important thing about analysis. Even when we get to design, you will get more about sign off, but you want to get a sign off even for your analysis. Your analysis is not final, but you want to get a sign-off. You want to make sure that you're in alignment. And who do you get a sign-off for? You get a sign-off from maybe the business analyst from the client point of view. Or you want to get a sign-off from the project lead, the product owner, from the client point of view, not from your own team. Your own team is useless if the product owner from the client point of view does not accept your analysis. Okay? Again, you want to avoid scope creep. What is scope creep? When people start adding requirements that were not identified in the initial stage. So when you start a project and someone else say, oh, we forgot to add this because it's part of the requirement. We forgot to add email template as a requirement. We forgot to say you have to create an email template. So who is now going to do the email template? Yes, it is easy for you because you're a consultant, but you're not going to get paid for it. So you need to identify that email template is something you need to create as part of consistency in emails. However, because you haven't identified that email template is a requirement, when it gets to implementation, it says develop a email template, and you're not asking your team, who will be doing this? Then chances are you're going to be getting into scope creep because it's outside of the scope of the initial plan. Okay, so you need to understand that you want to avoid any new requirements when the project kicks off. You want to avoid any new requirements when the project kicks off. Okay, that's analysis stage. Now, design. You've done the fun stuff, which I don't think is fun, but is the other stuff. Planning and analysis of a project is hard, but you've done it. Now, this is where your brain comes into play. This is where the consulting comes into play. This is where the Salesforce things you've learned come into play. So everything we've done before, a BA can do it, a PM can do it in a bigger organization. But in a smaller organization, you might be the one wearing that hat. So don't shy away from planning and analysis because they might not have enough resources to execute it. However, for design, this is your bread and butter. This is why you are certified as a Salesforce consultant. You need to be able to transform requirements into solutions. You need to be able to create a prototype. You need to be able to create mock-ups. So sometimes you can even create a simple solution in the hands-on org without even buying license, just to show the client that this is the expectation. So the prototypes is just like, okay, we are capable of doing this. Sending email, yes, we can do it. Creating a live chat, yes, we can do it. Show them the prototype. Then now do the technical solution design. Technical solution design is when you are developing your model, your data model, objects, you are bringing accounts, contacts, and opportunities. One of the things that you would realize is that you have already analyzed that you need to create a custom object. But what if the license does not permit creating a custom object? So you need to have done your analysis. Your analysis includes even the license you need to get, okay? This is part of preparation, analyzing and planning of a project. After you've done the design, remember, design does not mean you're going to the Salesforce org. Design means you're using your knowledge of Salesforce to imagine what is possible. Imagine what is possible and sketch it out. Using draw.io or any tools you want, sketch it out. Draw the data model. Draw the process mapping. What fields do you want to create? Don't create that field yet. Just write it down. Account name will be called account name with the camel case or with the underscore. So how do you want to represent account name? For instance, some people write account name like this. And some people write account name like this. Some people write account name like this, and some people write account name like this. So you need to, this is where it comes in, how you want to write the account name. This is where the design comes in. So the field design, what data type do you want to select? What field criteria? What is the minimum length of the title? What is the maximum length? This is where it comes into play. You don't start from the build, you do the design. You do the design. So whenever you go back to the design document, you don't even need to look for what the field name is, because the design document has all the field names, the data type, the minimum length, the maximum length, the visibility. Who gets to see the field? The field level security, it comes here in the design. The profile that gets to see a field is based on design. So don't do design first. Design is this stage. After you've done planning, analysis, you go to design, okay? Then the build, the form part. The form part is when you go to your hands-on org and you start creating custom objects. You go to your hands-on org and you start creating fields. You go to your hands-on org and you start creating permission set profile. This is where it comes in. As you can see, there is a process. There is a strategy. You don't just collect contract and the next thing you go into the Salesforce org to start building. No, you have to plan. You have to analyze. You have to design. In fact, design takes, after you get to this stage, once you finish this stage, you've already done the project. This one is just showing off. Building is just showing off. But then again, you have to build, right? Then you go to validation. What is validation? Validation is I've built this solution and I want to test the solution. But you're not the one that will be testing the solution. Yes, as a developer, as a consultant, you do what they call a unit testing. A unit testing is the testing you carried out yourself. A unit testing is I have created a report and I view that report, I can see data. Login as a user is a unit testing. Login as a profile that has that permission is a unit testing. Okay? However, you still need to hand over to the client to do what they call acceptance testing. Acceptance testing happens when you say to the client, I'm done, but I want you to test and validate what I've done. I want you to validate my reports. I want you to validate my model. I want you to validate the emails are working fine. I want you to validate the live chat is working fine. I want you to validate XYZ that we've stated in the requirement is working fine. That is valid. That is acceptance testing. Regression testing is when you are just testing the basic stuff. Like this is typically done by a QA. They test the minimum requirement to make sure that the user requirement has been fulfilled. Okay? And there's what they call performance testing. Performance testing is when you are loading data. You're loading data to see how your system will sustain large data. You're loading data to see if nothing is breaking. You know, when you are entering data into a field, you always enter the right data because your mind is geared towards entering the right data. However, when business is testing, they'll be using the wrong data to see what if we are entering a number in a test field? What if we are loading 1 million records compared to 10 records which you are putting in the system? What would happen to the formula? What would happen to your report? Report gets slower when you have large data. Do you want to include filters in your reports or you want to take filters off? What happens? This is performance testing. And there's what they call penetration testing. Penetration testing comes with ensuring that your application is secure. You don't have loopholes. I can penetrate through any platform and I cannot hack your application. This might not necessarily be applicable to most Salesforce projects. However, penetration testing in development requires you to test for security. Test for API. Are they exposed? If they are exposed, you need to fix it. Okay? Normally, penetration testing is done by an external agent to hack into your system. But then again, it depends on the enterprise. If the client budget is very small, they might not need penetration testing. Okay? Then you deploy. How do you deploy your changes to production? When is the go live? When do you freeze coding? When do you start training user? You get feedback and you provide support. As you can see, the phases of consulting is interesting, but if you're not following them, you will get into trouble. By trouble, I mean you can be shortchanging yourself. You might not get paid for the certain things you've done for the client. So make sure that you're following the right process, make sure that you're following the right, and you're actually adhering to what, maybe if you're working in a bigger organization, it might be easier for you. I keep saying that because they have templates. But if you're working in a smaller organization, if you're working with your own private organization, then you need to develop this template yourself. There are a lot of templates out there, but you need to develop yourself and be consistent with that template, because that could be a deal breaker for your business, okay? Now, let's go to possible challenges you could face in any project. And I've seen this happen a lot in Black Force projects. What are the possible challenges? Unclear requirements. If you don't have a requirement that is clear or is incomplete, you will get into trouble. If you start a project without knowing the requirements, you will get into trouble. Delayed meetings. If you call for a stand-up for 1 p.m. and your colleagues are coming in for 1:30 p.m., you already missed 30 minutes. That's valuable time when it comes to consulting, because consulting, you're making money by the hour. You're making money by the hour, and if you call for a meeting and the client is not aware of that meeting, you're already facing projects, you're already facing delays in your meeting, delays in your project, because this can have a ripple effect on the outcome of the project. Project team members and managers, these are also key things that could be a problem. If you don't have the right resources, if you want to develop an application and you don't even know how to write a code, you don't know how to use Salesforce, then this is a problem. If your project manager does not even know how to communicate, if you're not using the right communication tool, it's a problem. Ineffective communication with stakeholders. Don't tell me, Babatope said this is what we should do. Did you confirm it with Babatope before you start doing it? Even after you've done it, did you confirm it? Did you test it? Okay, project timeline. Babatope asked you to do something in 2 weeks, but now it's 2 weeks, you don't even know what to do, or you haven't created a field. That's the problem. These are challenges. You will face it in your problem. How do you resolve it? I'm not going to be teaching you how to resolve and how to do change management and stuff like that, but I need you to know that these are possible challenges in a project, okay? Now, implementation methods. You've seen this several times. You've heard about Agile, you've heard about Scrum, but what are the implementation methods when it comes to projects? There's what they call the waterfall and the Agile. Agile is new, waterfall is the old method, the old way of doing things. For instance, you have a linear and sequential approach. I want to do this before I do this. I want to get all the requirements and sign off before I even start, which might be good in a way. But then again, you have to be 100% sure before you start. Compared to Agile, whereby, okay, I want to get student grades into the case object. I also want to get support into the case object. How do I do this? I create a record type to differentiate between support and student grade. But in an Agile, you do it within 2 days and you're done with the project. In the waterfall, no, you don't just do it. You have to now ask the stakeholders, is it okay to do this record type? Now, what are the challenges? You don't start doing analysis and everything, then you plan, then you develop. With an Agile, we thought about it and we are implementing in 2 days. We don't have to wait until 4 weeks before we implement. We don't have to write hell of a document before we implement. So typically, this can be used when obviously, it depends on the kind of project. You can use waterfall or Agile. I'm not advocating for Agile and I'm not advocating for waterfall. It depends on the project, because sometimes you might realize that waterfall might just be better for you to implement a project in Salesforce. Whereas in a startup or in a very small environment, Agile could just be good as well, okay? Look at the flexibility, constant feedback. I can test, iterate, and get feedback easily. With waterfall, you have to deploy before you can get feedback. If you haven't deployed that solution in production, you wouldn't know and get feedback. But in Agile, you can get feedback straight up because you're deploying within 2 days, within 1 week. Okay, so understand that we can have waterfall and Agile and know the differences between agile, and waterfall. Okay? Now, we've talked about project management and strategies, plans, and phases and the likes. Okay? Now, let's talk about Salesforce a little bit. So when you want to implement a project for a business, you just don't, the hands-on orgs is so huge that sometimes you don't even know that this stuff requires you to have a license. Like yesterday, I think I told you about the installing chat into Blackforce, right? And I told you that you can have a chat within Blackforce, and if an agent is currently online, you can chat with someone within the Blackforce team right now. However, if you do not know the type of license you need to get, you might not be able to implement that. So as a consultant, you need to know the type of licenses available in Salesforce. You need to know how to recommend license to a business. You need to know the cost of licensing. You need to know all this stuff. So in Salesforce, they'll have what they call essential, professional, enterprise, and unlimited. These are license type. So let me go back to my presentation so I can explain it further to you. Type of Salesforce license. So this is based on edition. Edition meaning that Salesforce Essential for small support team. Maybe you have 5 support teams. So you can get a Salesforce Essential. But if you have like a larger team, you can get Lightning Professional. If you have a complex capability, you want to do all those assignment rules, all those escalation rules, all those queues, then you might want to get Lightning Enterprise, because Salesforce Essential might not be able to do the things we're doing in class. All those omni-channel you see, Salesforce Essential might not be able to do it. So don't just think because you have a Service Cloud certification, then you can say you can implement Service Cloud. No, know the type of license or the type of edition you want to get for your clients. Salesforce Unlimited obviously can do anything, okay? And if you look at what Salesforce gives you, it explains it to you. Case management, you can get it from Essential, that's fine. Service contract and entitlement, you cannot get it from Essential. You have to be on a professional in order to get it. Telephonic CTI, you can get it from all the edition. Web Service API, you can only get it from Enterprise. What does that mean? If you want to integrate system, external system, then you need to recommend this license for your business, for the business you're consulting for. So if the business requires you to integrate APIs, then you know that you need Enterprise. In addition, you don't get 24/7 support and configuration services unless you're on unlimited. So if you get stuck, you don't get this benefit unless you're on unlimited. In addition to that, you can also read more about what you can see. As you can see, there's so many things you can get, but you need to understand the differences. Case milestone tracker, you cannot get it from Essential, but you can get it from Professional and the likes. Okay, so you need to kind of like look details before you start recommending. This is part of your analysis. Carry out the analysis and see what license you need to get before you recommend license for your clients. And number 2, we have category of Salesforce license. I've talked about license based on edition. Now, categories of the Salesforce license. We have what they call the platform license. The platform license, like I told you, is just the basic license that gives you basic objects, access to basic objects. Then you have the user license. That one is a Salesforce license. It gives you more objects and you can do a lot of things with it. Then we have the permission set license. By the way, the platform license, like I said, is one of these. Okay, this is the platform license. It's based on the edition you're selecting. The user license is what you give to a user. So a Salesforce user needs to have the license. And the user license is what you give a user. Permission set license is an extra feature from the Salesforce org that makes a particular user to carry out particular activity. So what does that mean? It means that if I want to use Einstein scoring for opportunity, you just don't get it out of the box. You need to have what they call permission set license to do that analytics, to do that AI feature. You need what they call the permission set license. So even though Salesforce is saying Einstein scoring can help you predict opportunity, you cannot get that feature without having a permission set license, okay? Because an extra feature that Salesforce is adding onto the org. And we have what they call the feature license. You want to send campaign, you need a marketing, I called it marketing cloud, it's marketing user. You need a marketing user feature license. These are licenses that you can configure on top of a user profile when you're creating a user, okay? Permission set license, you add it to the user. You add it as an assignment to a user, but feature license, you enable it when you are creating a user, okay? Then we can talk more about the contact center licenses, and we can give you an example. I think I explained this permission marketing user here. So yes, so Service Cloud license, what do you need? You need access to accounts, cases, contact, entitlements, service contract, and the likes. So you need to know this, and you need to know the objects you can gain access to. It's very important, okay? And I can go on and on about licenses, but the best way to know them is to visit the Salesforce website and see what you can do. Field service license is an extra feature license you can add. Digital engagement, the community you see, is an extra license you have to add. And it is based on a monthly fee, which is billed annually. Okay, so know that you cannot just get those features that you're using right now without having them as an add-on to the particular user. So know the difference between what you can get out of the box, what you can get based on the addition, and what you can get based on the feature. Okay, this is very important. So now I can go about community again. So community is about the external website, which we're going to see when we configure community in the platform. It's an external website, and you need licenses for that. You also need licenses for community. So it's not like, okay, I want to configure self-help website for my business. It's just going to be like that. No, you need licenses for them. So understand that all those features that we are going to be doing or using requires us to have licenses, okay? Now that we've talked about the license you need, we've talked about the way to approach your project, we've talked about analysis, let's talk about deployment strategy. When you create a new object in Salesforce, you have to create it in where they call the sandbox area. Obviously, if the business is live, then you cannot just go into the production org and create a new object. Now, how do you deploy changes in Salesforce? How do you move things from the sandbox to production? By the way, sandbox is a playground, just like we have in hands-on org, but the sandbox is for the business. It's a playground that is based on the business org. So it's not just a random playground, but a playground that is based on the business hub. We're going to be seeing that shortly in the demonstration, but I just want you to know that you can deploy changes using change sets. Salesforce web interface, you don't need to write a code. You don't need to touch a code. You just deploy it straight off from Salesforce. In addition, you can use what they call the ant migration. That is mainly for developers. If you just do a bit of coding configuration, and you can deploy using ant migration. Then we have what they call the Visual Studio Code, which is also mainly for developers. You can retrieve files and you can deploy solutions that you're making changes to. But as a consultant, Service Cloud consultant, majorly, this is what you should be using. If you're not going to be hiring a developer to develop any code, most likely you will be using the change set to deploy your code. 1 minute, I think Black Force Training raised hand. I don't know. Is there any question? Just 1 minute. Is there any question?
No.
Okay. So
I'll just ask a question relating to the training.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. So Visual Studio Code, source code editor requires the Salesforce CLI. So if you're a developer, you're likely to see this, but as a consultant, as a Service Cloud consultant, you probably don't need this. Okay. One of the things you will need is ability to change set deployment, which I'm going to show you. And if you're a professional, one of your projects would require you to do this. You have your project and you'll be deploying to production. Okay, so this is deployment strategy. But remember, you cannot deploy to production when you are in a busy period. You need to have a strategy. So you have to say, okay, I want to deploy in the evening, or I want to deploy when service or when we are not in working hours. You need to have a strategy. Number two, I created a permission set. Do I need to use code to deploy a permission set? Maybe no. Maybe change set can just do that within 2 minutes. But then again, you need to have a strategy. You have just installed an App Exchange plugin from the App Exchange. How do you deploy that App Exchange plugin into production? You need a strategy. You need a strategy. You cannot just download application from the App Exchange and install it for all users. You have to install for the admin user, test it in the sandbox. If it works fine, then deploy to production. You just don't install into production directly, okay? You need a strategy. So part of your consultant requires you to know the strategy for deployment, okay? You need a strategy for deploying whatever you've done into the production org. So whenever you're working as a consultant, you don't work directly in production. You work in your sandbox and you move to UAT. Then you move from UAT to production. That's a strategy. Okay? As a consultant, you need to know that. Okay? Now, we have to get into the hands-on org. But before we get there, I would like to take a pause to find out if you guys have any questions based on what I've done and what I've said, and you guys would like me to explain something further before we go into the hands-on org and try something based on some of the things we've learned. Okay, so please raise your hands up and I'll call you according to how your hands are being raised up. Okay, Toyin, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much. Yeah, two things. You talked about the templates that a consultant can use probably when you are with the business. I don't know if we can have that, like a template we can actually use when we are going for probably a business presentation or something. I don't know if we can have that. My other question is, I work in an organization where I do the two as a business analyst and Salesforce, which we are implementing. We are going to be implementing soon. My issue is, what if some of the requirements are missing? And how do I put this? As in, there are some objects that probably we needed to create and it's not captured in those requirements. Is it possible for the consultant to go back to the developer and develop those objects for us instead of creating custom objects as a Salesforce admin on my own?
So as an admin, you don't do stuff. You only update or edit stuff. So you need to communicate change. It's called the change management approach. Like, how do you make changes? As an admin, you're pretty much a product owner for the business. Okay, so you don't go and create objects unless the business asks you to create it, but there must be a change process because it has to be documented. Do you understand? So they might probably need to get in touch with a consultant depending on the contracts. So if there's a retainer, because if you make changes based on without the consultant instruction, then you might violate the service agreement. If I do something right now, I deploy it and I have a contract to come every month to maintain that system, and I go back to that system in 1 month time and the admin has done something I did not authorize. They've messed up the org. I can decide not to touch the org because I'll be responsible for anything that happens to the org. However, as an admin, you are a product owner. What you do is configuration. You do testing, but you should document it and you should get it approved. But for small businesses, obviously, you don't need that, okay? You don't need that. You just go and talk to the CEO and the CEO will say, do this and do that. In addition, you request for the template. Template is usually proprietary, right? But at BlackForce, we're going to create a template going forward. So if you're a professional, one of the tasks you'll be asked to do is prepare a template. We are going to assume that you're presenting to a possible business owner. And we're going to take the best template, modify it, and make it a BlackForce template. Then maybe I can give you that. But I wouldn't give you the template I've used in the past because they are proprietary for the businesses I've worked for. Okay?
Yes, it can just be anyone, not necessarily attached to any company. Something that we can always use as a guide. I'm not a professional, though. But I still want it.
Sure. We're going to create it. Don't worry. Okay?
Thank you.
Yeah. Perhaps can unmute yourself and speak, please.
Yeah, hello, good evening, boss. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm good. And yourself?
Very well, thank God. All right, so I have 2 key questions. One has to do with the validation testing processes. You gave us some examples. One of the things that I'm curious to know is, I know that we do A/B testing when it comes to Marketing Cloud. Do we even apply A/B testing when it comes to Service Cloud? I'm just curious to know because I don't think I saw you talk about that inside the other options that you have, like penetration testing and all the other options you gave us. That's my question. That's my first question. The second one is on the release management part. I noticed also that you mentioned, Ant, you mentioned change set. I've heard a lot about Copado. Is this something that we need to worry about as consultants, even if we don't use them immediately in our day-to practice? Those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
No worries. So the first one is A/B testing. A/B testing is used for marketing. Okay, it's used for performance. It's used for to find out which of the tool we've deployed is getting traction. So it has nothing to do with whatever you've done. However, if you want to remove one and retain one, you use A/B testing to find out which one of them does the user like, which one of them is working fine. Then you take the A or you take the B. Okay, that's A/B testing. Copado is a tool that helps you with deployment. It's like another tool out there. So if you're using a tool that charges you monthly fee or something for deployment, fine. If the client is willing to pay for it, fine. But then again, anything Copado can do, you can do it as a consultant. It's just about, are they paying you enough to do it, or you want to use a tool that can be done within 2 minutes, but you have to be paying a monthly fee. Okay, so Copado is just a tool, and you can do whatever Copado can do, but it's going to take you longer time to do compared to Copado that does it within minutes. Okay, but you have to pay for the services they're providing for you. Okay. Echo, please. Echo, please.
All right, thank you very much, Babatope. Just a quick one though. Does it suffice to say that the sequence deployment could be sandbox, then the UAT, and then production?
Repeat that again, sorry.
Okay, you made mention of the sequence of deployment, right? Like from sandbox, you move to UAT, users acceptance, testing, and all of that, and then production. In that sequence, does it work like that?
It depends on the organization. If you're working with a smaller organization, they don't have the luxury of creating QA environments, SIT environment, and UAT environment. So it depends on how big the organization is. However, what you need to do is move into dev, whereby all your developers get the code in one place. After that, you move into QA. QA will test the solution, ensure everything works fine. After QA approves the solution, you go to UAT. After UAT, you could also go to SIT before UAT. SIT is system integration testing, whereby you load data into the system and you test for performance. Then you go to UAT. UAT is where the user is testing. You don't touch anything in UAT because everything in UAT is like literally telling the user, this is production. Tell me that you love everything here. If you love everything here, we're moving this to production. However, if you don't love it right now, tell us, okay? That's where you do your testing. That's where the user, the client, will do the testing, not you. You don't do testing in UAT, you give it to the client, and clients only have access to the UAT, not you, okay?
All right, thank you.
No worries. So now, before we go into certification questions, let's go into a case study. A case study is this. Operation team members at Blackforce, they are complaining about repetitive questions by students. When does for instance, this kind of question they ask us is this: when does the next admission training start? How can I enroll into a program? I cannot see my learning. Operations want a solution that would prevent repetitions. So they want fewer typing of emails because every operation person would need to type this response for the user. Every time they have to type the response for the user. In addition, they have to type in their own English. But I don't like it. I don't want Bumi to have a different pattern to response. I don't want Rosemary to have a different pattern to response. I don't want Karen to have a different pattern to response. I don't want anyone working for operation to have a different message to my students. I want them to have a consistent email saying, "Dear Babatope, thank you for getting in touch with Blackforce support team. As you can see, we are currently having a cohort which ends XYZ dates. We will let you know when the next cohort starts." That's a simple message we want to send to everyone that asks us when the next cohort, when the next training will start. In as much as we can constantly type this, it is repetitive and it's boring. Now, how can you ensure that I can do this without even thinking twice? I just click a button and it does that for me automatically. How can I achieve that? Number two. Now you have been hired to investigate this. So this is a case study, right? It's just a typical case study at work. Now you've been hired as a consultant to solve this problem for Blackforce. How should you go about it? I'll just quickly give you a tool that can help you. A typical tool that can help you is what they call the macro. The macro enables you to make quick tests, run repetitive operations. So if you realize that anytime you see something that has no, maybe someone acknowledges an email and say, oh, thank you, I've received that, that's not a problem. You want to close that email, right? You want to close it. You can easily go to close and press complete, and maybe you want to do something behind the scene once it's closed. You can run what they call a macro that would automatically achieve this. In addition to that, you want to make sure that anytime you're typing email, you don't have to constantly type the email. You don't have to constantly type it because that's long. You want to always type the same email and you want it to be consistent. There's what they call the macro in Salesforce. Macro is part of the utility. Okay, macro is part of the utility. Yesterday we saw something like utility. So macro is part of a utility that can be used to run repetitive tasks. In addition to that, there's what they call the quick test. The quick test gives you a pre-made test. A pre-made test that you can constantly use without having to type it all over again. So what could have been a solution for Blackforce? Blackforce will have a notepad or a Microsoft Word whereby they copy the test and they copy and paste. That's repetitive, right? That's too much clicks. I don't want that. I want everything designed within Salesforce. So let's quickly look at that. The first thing you need to do in order to have quick tests and macro is to enable them. So I will close all this from yesterday. I will go to setup and I will go to permission sets. Permission sets, I want to create a macro permission set and a quick test permission set, okay? I will click on new and I will say grant quick test or something along that line. Then I say I can select license, but if I don't select license, then I can use it for any license, okay? So this is just a permission set, but I need to be able to grant quick test access because normally you don't get quick test access for a user unless you grant it, okay? So I go to the objects, I look for quick test objects. This is quick test. Then I click on edit. I believe this is an admin stuff, so nothing I'm doing here is new. I'm just giving a permission set that allows me to use quick test, okay? Then I assign this permission set to myself, okay? Or any user, okay, that is in the org. So now I've assigned the permission set to the user and I click on done. Okay, these are the users that are eligible for quick test. You cannot use quick test for integration user or a user that does not have the right profile for quick test. Okay, now I have granted quick test object permission using permission set for this user. I need to create another permission set to grant what they call the macro. There are three types of macro. There is what they call the regular macro that does normal macro stuff. What is normal macro stuff? In Excel, I currently update a field. I can just run a macro that will update that field, okay? That's a regular macro. You run it and you can reverse it. There's also what they call the irreversible macro. The irreversible macro, once you initiate it, you cannot reverse it. What are the irreversible macro? For example, sending an email. Once you run a macro to send an email, you cannot call back that email. You've already sent it. Okay, so that's an irreversible macro. And there's what they call a macro that can send bulk transaction. For instance, if you have cases and you want to send email to all these cases, this is a typical use case for a bulk macro that can send emails to multiple cases at a time. Okay, let's say someone is just acknowledging that they got our email, like 10 people, and you want to just send, okay, that's fine. You just run a bulk macro, okay? So that's macro for you. And let me create a permission set that can grant me an irreversible macro. Grant irreversible macro, because I want to be able to send an email for the Blackforce user that says, I would like to find out when the next admin training will be happening. I assign it to myself, okay? Assign. Now I've created two macros and two permission sets that grants me a quick test and a macro privilege, okay? So now that we have that, let's go and enable macro. Okay, we go to macro. Oh, before that, I needed to have done something because I gave quick test access But for macro, I did not do anything. So I needed to have granted the macro access, okay? You go to app permissions, you edit, and you grant irreversible, you look for it. Let me just look for it, okay? Run macro with multiple records, manage user can't undo, okay? And I think that macro is fine. Yeah, that macro is fine, save. Okay? Then you save. And for quick test settings, you enable this quick test, okay? So if you don't enable this, you'll not be able to access the quick test in the folder because you have to store the quick test in a folder, okay? That's for the quick test. Then if you macro, you go to macro settings and you can search macro. You can also save macro in a folder, okay? So now that we have those two things, now what we need to do is we need to bring macro to our, so I want you to be able to see the footer. So we have history, right? We have omnichannel. We need to bring macro to this footer, okay? So we go to the app manager. Again, this is Salesforce admin. We've not even done the service cloud stuff. Permission set is Salesforce admin. Bringing macro to the footer is Salesforce admin, okay? We go to service console, edit. Then we bring macro to the footer, okay? Macro is added to the footer now, save. So if you go to this, you refresh this, you'll be able to see macro, okay? So what does the history tab, what does it do? History tab is, I want to quickly access the case I just opened. Let's say I close this case. I want to quickly access that case. That's the history tab. It gives me access to the recently closed case I just opened. Again, this is the benefit of the console, Service Console. Service Console gives you the privilege, opportunity to do this kind of stuff, okay? With the normal Salesforce tabs, you don't get to do this, okay? Now we have a macro. What is macro? Macro is just a way of creating repeated tasks, okay? So what we can do now is we can create a new macro. But before we create a new macro, we can actually do some button, okay? So what do I want to do? I want to create a quick test. I go to edit, add more item, quick test. Okay. Then I want to also add a macro. Okay. So what that means is that I can see the quick test and I can see the macro in this place. Okay. Then again, I go to macro. I create a new macro. When I create a new macro, I need to give it a name. Send I wouldn't call it repetitive. Send next cohort email. Send next cohort email. So anyone working with operation at Blackforce would know the purpose of this macro, okay? But if you want to explain, you say this macro sends or replies a student that asks Blackforce about the next admin training. Okay, this is what the macro does, and because anytime you create you send an email to support, it creates a case. So you want the macro to work on the case objects. Okay, save. Now that you have the macro, you want to what? Create instructions. Instructions are what you are telling the macro to do. The macro to send an email. You click on edit. When you click on edit instruction, it gives you this layout. And this is where you control what the macro does. I want this macro to go to the email section of the case. After getting to the email section of the case, I want it to insert an email template, which I have created. If I don't have an email template, I can create that email template. Okay, so let's quickly create that email template before we start using it. So I'll say email templates, new email template, and I want to say send next cohort email, okay? Make sure that you can relate it to a case. Then I can put it in a public folder so I can easily have access to it. Then I call it send next cohort email, so I can make reference to it. Then I can say, dear the case owner, okay? Imagine you use the merge fields to find the first name or whatever it is. Okay, dear first name, thank you for reaching out to Blackforce. As you can see, we currently have a cohort ongoing. We'll notify you when our next cohort starts. Your case number is regards Blackforce support, okay? So now this is gonna be generic all the time, meaning that any operation person does not necessarily have to type this, okay? Or whatever it is gonna be generic because it's now template. Save. Now that we save this, I can go back to my macro, look for that email, send next cohort email, okay? So I'm saying select next, go to email, select, insert the email template and add another instructions, okay? You can add another instruction if you want, or you can add what they call a destructive instruction, which is send. So once you click on send, the macro will run and it's gonna send an email to the client or to the student. That is macro, and you just close this once you're done, okay? You close this once you're done. Now, what do we want to do again? We don't want to be typing confirmation of any message. We want to be able to use an existing template, or we want to be able to use an existing test. That's what they call the quick test. The quick test enables you to repeat yourself without actually, with consistency, okay? I'll go to quick test and I will create a quick test. So the quick test, what does it do? I want to say, what could be a quick test? A quick test is my learning. So my learning quick test. So the user have complained that they cannot see my learning, okay? I'll go to the case number, but obviously I don't really need the case number, right? You just say, hi, whatever the person is. I can also grab the first name, okay? So what's the first name from the case or from the, okay, the first name, case does not necessarily have a first name, but I can grab from the contacts, I can grab the first name. If the case has a contact, then we can grab the first name from that. So hi, first name, you have this case number, okay? And go to my learning, ensure you are subscribed and click on whatever, right? It's just a way of saying, okay, put it in a way, or put it in wherever you want to use it. Okay, typically you want to use it for greetings, or you want to use it for closing, but typically quick test is something that is very repetitive. If you're working as an agent and you want to constantly say regards Babatope Black Force support team, you put it under closing. But if you want to make it something more generic, you put it under whatever category it is. Okay. And you can also create your category for quick tests, okay? Then where do you want to use it? I want to use it when I'm sending email. I want to use it when I'm talking on the portal. I want to use it when I'm creating a task. That's where you use the quick test. So let's see the quick test and the email template in action. So if you have a repetitive email in terms of a case, you go to the case and you have my learning not showing. You want to be able to type a message, okay? You want to be able to type a message. You can now say, okay, this is the macro. I want to look for send next cohort email, then run macro. So hold on for 1 minute. Email template, we did not recognize the prefix. Just 1 minute, let me see. Done. Run macro again. Okay, there is no contact. Okay. Okay. Save. Then run the macro again. Okay. Macro was applied and it was done. Sent. Done. That's it. So if I should check my Black Force demo email, this is it. Thank you for reaching out to Black Force. As you can see, we currently have a cohort ongoing. We will notify you when next cohort starts. I did not even read the case. I know that it's asking for when the next cohort starts. I just go to macro and click on run. That's how to improve productivity. As a consultant, you've solved a problem for Black Force team, and they will love you because you've actually eliminated one of their tasks. In addition to that, if you want to send an email, you can use a quick test. I'm trying to see, there's a way to call the quick test. Let me see, go to emails. Then you go to, did I enable quick test for this guy? Just 1 minute, let me see the profile of this guy. I think I did, but let me go to quick test. Quick test. Okay, share quick test. I don't want to hide quick test and button. Save. And you want to go to the object manager, it has that. Let me just refresh again. And go to emails. Okay, so now I want to quickly type the same message and I don't want to repeat myself. I click on quick test and I say my learning quick test. Can you see? I was able to get I Babatope, you have this case, my learning blah, 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 and I send. I am not typing anything. I am sending consistent emails. I am sending consistent text message without doing anything. Just 1 or 2 clicks and I'm done. This is how to improve productivity as a service cloud consultant. So you will come to a working organization and they will ask you, study our operation and find out how you can improve our operation and make it better. That's why anytime I emphasize, follow the process in Black Force. I know where I'm going. I know where we're taking Black Force. And if you don't follow the process, you will frustrate the efforts that we're trying to do. I know, look at most of the time, for most part of my life, I have worked with big organizations, Exxon, TCS, Saipem, and the likes, right? And I know what makes them successful. The things that make them successful is process. Process is what differentiates a struggling company and a successful company? Who would approve a $1 million budget without the process? Who is going to scale from 100 to 1,000 customers? You need a process. If breakfast grows to 1,000 tomorrow and you're sending me an email to find out whether you can create an object or you can configure a field pick list, I would not be able to attend to you. So why can I not create a process that would ensure that anytime you have this, you know who to reach out to? Anytime you have this, you know how to resolve your problem. I want everyone to be happy, but the only way I can guarantee happiness with the student is process. It has nothing to do with me. It has to do with the process. And this is one of the process. Salesforce helps you to improve your process without even thinking much. So as a consultant, you need to find out what can I do to improve process? This is your bread and butter. People get paid a lot of money just to improve process. And you're given the tools right now. Remember, follow the process. What is the process? You start with the planning. Then you analyze. Analysis is very important. Even planning is crucial, but analysis is more important. You cannot solve a problem that does not exist. You cannot solve a problem that cannot be quantified. You need a process. You need to understand the gaps. Then your implementation would make sense to the business. If I don't see a problem sending email, I don't need to create a macro or a quick test. But if Bumi is typing in a different English and Rosemary is typing in a different English, I want to streamline that English to a generic English so no one can predict who sent this email. No one can say it was Rosemary or it was Bumi or it was whoever works for Blackforce sends this email. That's a process. That's Service Cloud. That's consulting. So, okay, guys, this is Service Cloud Consulting, and this is one of the things we are going to be doing, okay? In our project or in whatever things are assigned to you, you will be doing something like this, okay? I'm gonna take a pause here to find out if you guys have any questions, and I'll be able to address them according to how your hands are being raised up. Okay, please raise up your hand if you have any questions, then I can call you. Thanks. So Isaac, you can unmute yourself and speak, please.
Okay, thank you. When you mentioned about process, which is what differentiates like a successful company from the one struggling. Now, does that have something to do with like gap analysis and capability, maturity, model integrity?
Yes. So that's the comprehensive approach, right? But then again, it's an element of process. For you to improve a process, you need to understand the gap analysis. You need to understand what is the normal operation right now. If you don't know what they're doing right now, you cannot just say you want to implement macro or quick tests. You cannot just say you want to implement templates. You will understand what they're doing right now. And you will now do your implementation. So understand the gap analysis based on the Service Cloud features. That will now drive your process. That will drive your changes. Then once you implement those changes, it becomes the business process or the business ways of doing things. So anyone that comes into the organization tomorrow would already know what email to send. They wouldn't even think about it. They'll just click on my learning issue email, next admin course training email, okay? They don't need to type anything. They just click and they are consistent with the business expectations, okay? Bob can unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, again, thank you so much. My question is, if I know we have the AI tools capability getting matured inside Salesforce, if I don't even want them to touch it, where it's all kind of if I see the keywords, is there any way I think the system should, I'm just thinking, is the system able to recognize those keywords? I want to know, say the keyword inside the email, not maybe the headline says, I want to know when the next cohort is going to be, or I want to register for Salesforce Professional. Let's just say that's one that comes in. Do I even have to touch it as, let's say, the sales agent in the front end, if the AI can actually capture those keywords in there and send a generic email?
I haven't gotten there yet, and I don't think Salesforce has gotten there yet, but most likely they are working on it. Most likely it's currently happening, but I haven't used it yet. Again, there's so many tools, right? There's so many tools, and we just haven't used it yet. Okay, so I cannot make a comment on that. Okay, so but there are hard tools like that. I can guarantee you that. Okay. Okay, Babsken, are you good?
Yeah, I'm very good. I'm just interested in the maturity stage of it. I know that, like you said, there are one or two tools out there, and I'm just curious to see how Salesforce is infusing that. Obviously, given that they want to make sure that as much as possible, define the process in a way that there is very limited manual intervention that obviously is prone to mistakes.
Yes, yes. Victor, unmute yourself and speak, please.
Good evening, Babatope.
Yeah.
My question, I don't know if I will be in line anyway. As a Salesforce Service Cloud consultant, if we are improving the process the way you have done it on the macro and the quick test now, if we are consulting and we are already giving the guidelines, what they are to do to improve the process, and we suggest what you just did now, are we to do the implementation, or we are only just suggesting and giving them the process to follow?
Look, you cannot create a process for a business. Business needs to give you the process after analysis. Okay, so then again, you can be hired as a consultant to improve process. It's a different thing from hired as a consultant to implement a process or to do this stuff. Do you understand what I mean? You could be a process improvement analyst. So that's different from a service cloud consultant, from a Salesforce consultant. So they are different. Look at, if I tell you that there are so many jobs that you can even do based on your skill set, you wouldn't know. But you need to tell me your skill set, and I can get you, okay, this is the kind of job you can apply for based on your interest. So you need to know what you're good at, and you will now apply for those jobs. Process improvement is different from implementation specialist. Implementation specialist is different from business analyst. Business analyst is different from project management. Do you understand what I mean? So many things you can do, but you need to wear one cap in a project. Don't wear all the cap. Wear one cap, okay?
Okay.
Nita, please.
Hi, Babatope. This is Benita. Thank you for all you do. So my question is with respect to the macro and the quick text. So what if the customer actually sends an email for the next cohort, but also has other inquiries in the body of that email? And I remember that if you respond with a macro, it's only going to address the question for the next cohort. So how do you respond in that situation? Thanks.
So basically, you're saying that the macro would attend to the question for the next cohort, right? So, is there any problem with the way we've designed the macro? Later, I want to understand the question properly.
Okay, so let's assume the customer is asking for the date for the next cohort, and probably asking for the price or some other kind of question, right? But the email template we have for the next cohort only addresses the date, gives the customer the information for the date. Okay. Now, if we respond with that particular macro, just one question will be answered, right? So how do you implement, as in what do you do in that kind of situation? Will your customer service agent have to draft an email? I don't know, as in I just want to know what you're doing in that situation. If there are other questions in the customer's email that's not addressed in the macro, that's going to be sent by the agent.
That's a good question. And when you're creating a macro, there's what they call logic. Okay, there's what they call logic. So I did not do advanced macro, but you can add logic. If this contains this or something like that, you can add logic to a macro. You can add logic, and based on the logic, you can structure what needs to be done. But then again, you can, and that's why process analysis is very important. If you don't analyze the process, you wouldn't see the types of emails you can create. So to answer your question, an email template should have as many information as possible that addresses those questions without the student asking further questions. For instance, instead of you just saying the next cohort will be XYZ date, you can say the next cohort will be XYZ date. The pricing for the next cohort is this. If you want to enroll, you need to go on blackforce.com.ca/programs and reserve a spot. When you get an email, you will get a Telegram link to join, to communicate with other students, and you give them all the information within that template. So you don't need to create multiple templates, but there's also what they call the logic. The logic helps you to put some if-else statements. If this as from the web, do this. If this is of type this, do this. Okay? That's what the logic does. In addition to that, you can create multiple templates. You can create multiple templates based on the logic as well. Okay? So there's so many ways you can do it, but you need to analyze the type of request you're currently getting before you can improve it. Okay? Before you can develop a process and a template. Okay? Nonso, please. You can
can you hear me?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. Thank you again for this class. Very exciting and intriguing. So my question is, so I hear the consultant's role, and I can understand that as a consultant, we might be wearing several hats depending on the kind of organizations we're working for, right? If it's a big organization, we might be working in a team, and small organization, we might just wear one hat, and doing several things. First of all, I just wanted to confirm that that is the case. Then secondly, okay.
Yeah, carry on, please.
Okay, I think you're trying to show me something. Then secondly, yeah, I don't know if anyone has asked this previously, if it's possible to share, I know we get the videos, but if we could share the slides, except if it's your intellectual property, I don't know, but it would be really very helpful if one can get access to the slides, given that this has more theoretical aspects than the admin side.
Okay, I will try to see how I can communicate this slide. Okay, I'll try to see. Normally, I don't share stuff. I just kind of like put it on the Black Force website, so you can always use it anytime you want. But I'll try to see if I can share this, okay? I'll try to see, okay? Right, and to answer your first question, it depends on the business, right? If you're working for RBC, they're only going to be paying you maximum 120, 150 or something. Why do you want to put on a PM ad and a process improvement ad and consultant ad? You don't want to stress yourself, especially when it's not your business. You want to do what is required to succeed in your role. But if you're working in a smaller enterprise, like a startup, trust me, I've done a lot of stuff that I should sometimes I've replied emails. I shouldn't be replying emails, but I've replied emails. Sometimes I have actually written code. I shouldn't be writing code, but I've written codes because I want this done ASAP. So if you're working with a startup or a small business, you'll be required to do a lot of things that is not necessarily what you're paid for. However, because the business requires it or the business needs it, then you have to do it. Okay? So if you're working with bigger enterprise, there's a structure in place. Even if you go and do something that you're not supposed to do in a bigger enterprise, you could get into trouble because process. In a bigger enterprise, there's even a process for the jobs, roles, and responsibility. And people get offended if you're doing their job and they will think you want to get their job off them. Okay, don't be too excited to do someone else's job when you're working for a large enterprise because it can come as a negative feedback for you. Okay?
Gotcha.
Okay, good. So you guys have learned a lot today. Like literally, You've seen how to execute a project in just few minutes or maybe 1 hour. Let's go into sample questions you're likely to face if you're writing your Service Cloud certification exams, okay? So let's just kind of like go through this and you just kind of like put your answers in the group so I can know how you guys are doing, okay? I'll just read the question out and you just tell me what the answer is. Also, Major Solar is currently live with Sales Cloud and in the process of implementing Service Cloud. UMS wants to create a sandbox to test its Service Cloud implementation without the real Sales Cloud data. Which 3 sandbox types can be used to accomplish this? The Administrator Sandbox, the Partial Copy Sandbox, the Test Sandbox, the Full Sandbox, and Developers Pro Sandbox. Okay, there is nothing like Administrator Sandbox, that's definitely, and Test Sandbox. Sandbox is a test environment. Sandbox is a test environment, so there's nothing like a test sandbox as well. Okay, so and this is because in your hands-on org, you don't have the opportunity of using a sandbox. So let me quickly show you how this stuff looks like if you have a Salesforce license. So I'll just go to Blackforce Salesforce and I'll show you. You go to sandboxes. Okay, you don't even need to go further. This is Sandbox 6. And you see, we have Developer, we have Developer Pro, we have Partial Copy, we have Full Sandbox, okay? So if you go to the options, we have Full Sandbox, we have Developer Pro Sandbox, we have Partial Copy, okay? That's, so some of you guys, if you're in professional or if you're in the paid service cloud, this thing, you'll be working with a sandbox and you'll be deploying whatever you're doing into QA and UAT, okay? So you see that the UAT is a partial copy because it has data from production, okay? So remember, in sandboxes, we have Developer Pro, partial copy, and a full, and you don't get access to this in hands-on org, okay? Also Major, a consulting firm has retained to implement a new Service Cloud platform for a company. This company requires quick iteration and speedy project completion. The company has requested frequent project updates for check-ins and refinements. Which methodology should the consultant recommend to meet the given requirement? Okay, you guys already know this is agile, right? Agile, everything is agile. So this is an exam question, imagine, and you just learned that tonight, okay? That's good, well done, guys. Oh, I think this is the same thing, so I have to go to the next one. Cloud Kicks want to reduce the clicks a customer support agent uses when working on a case. This includes the time it takes to create, resolve, and close the case. Which 3 Salesforce productivity features should be used to accomplish these requirements? Quick test, macro, omnichannel, publisher action, chatter. We did this tonight. I don't know, is publisher action part of it? I'm not even sure. Is publisher action part of it, or is it just omnichannel? But definitely AB is one of them, right? AB is one of them, and the third one, I'm not sure. So maybe you guys, I think, who is saying omnichannel? Okay, I would check the answer for this, but I know AB is part of it, okay? So if they say you should choose 2, definitely AB. And actually, click when publishing. Okay, I don't know the third one, but I will check for you guys, okay? The support manager at Also Major Container has determined that there are 5 common case types that are always resolved during the first call. Additionally, the support manager noticed that support agents are sending similar emails to customer for each case. Which 3 solutions can consultant implement to minimize the time it takes a support agent to create email for these cases. Implement macros, enable the support process for default email template, implement email to case, implement quick tests, enable the support settings for default email to case. So I think this is the same thing. So we just need to choose 3. So we've already eliminated 1, right? So you choose A, you choose D, and you choose E, okay, or B. Either way is, support settings, please. Okay, support settings. There are differences, support process, support settings. You want to do support settings. We've just done macro, we've done quick test, then support testing. Can you see how these questions are being addressed in your certification exam? Everything I said tonight is there, but you just need to know why and what to use, okay? OSA Major has created permission set granting access to objects and fields in one of its sandboxes. How should a consultant deploy this permission set to production? Publish a managed package, manually create the permission set, create unmanaged package, use change sets. Again, I told you, change set is what consultants use to deploy, okay? They don't use, these are code related, and if you're not a developer, you shouldn't be choosing something like this, okay? Unless you're doing platform developer. This one, an inside sales contact center manager would like to assess the ROI of the contact center. This is what we did yesterday. Which 3 metrics should the manager use to assess the ROI? Opportunities per channel, cost per call, average queue time per agent, number of leads created, number of sales queue. So this can be very tricky for you guys. I want to see how you guys are thinking. So look at, I want to see ROI. What is ROI? Return on investment. Return on investment. Does opportunities per channel give me anything about return on investment? Let's be realistic. Opportunities per channel. What does that mean? Opportunities per channel. Opportunities, unless opportunity is closed, it is nothing. Unless opportunity is closed, it is nothing. Cost per chat, per call. When you're talking about cost, contact center. When you're talking about contact center, you are talking about relationship between the call center and the business in terms of money, okay? Cost per call is a requirement, okay? And you want to look at number of leads created, average number of sales queue. So you want to look at the number of leads created, and you want to look at the number of sales queue, okay? So average queue time per agent. How does average queue time per agent translate into business? How does it translate? You need to understand what you're doing, okay? How does average queue time translate into business? You need to understand it, okay? Leads, number of leads created, return on the investment contact center. So I wouldn't, some of the questions you have to determine based on, you say availability, average queue time per agent, availability. Average queue time per agent. Yeah, that's true. Availability of the agent. Yeah, that's true. That's true. But again, yeah. So you want to look at, personally, I will look at the leads you're creating. Okay. I'll look at the leads you're creating. I'll look at the cost per call, definitely the cost per call, but average queue time per agent, ROI. Actually, if you're talking about ROI, you should be talking about this as well. Apologies. You should be talking about this, okay? But the leads created, it's also a good thing. How does that translate into Well, you're still creating the leads. You're still creating the leads. You're still creating the leads. The leads is what their potential prospective customers, okay? They're prospective customers. The sales skill does not help you with the call center, okay? The call center is which of the calls that is coming from the call center is bringing money to the business. Okay, so you want to look at the opportunity per channel. I'm sorry about this. This should be part of it. You want to look at the cost per call, and you want to look at the leads you're creating. Okay, because if you convert the leads, then it is bringing money to the business. Okay, but then again, you need to be able to justify your answer when it comes to Service Cloud certification. It's very tricky and it can be very descriptive in terms of what they want you to know, but please be able to justify your answer, okay? Again, I think we've done this. Northern Trail has been testing an updated Service Console in a sandbox and is ready to move to production. Which deployment solution should you use? Okay, you want to use ChangeSet. ChangeSet, we've talked about it. Again, always select ChangeSet if you're a consultant. If you're a developer, you want to use something else, but consultant, always opt out for ChangeSet, okay? Also, Major Solar Customer Support Manager wants to provide proactive communication to customers who are likely to provide low customer satisfaction. So we told you about this yesterday, right? Customer satisfaction score, CSAT. So what would you do what metric would you be looking at to see which of the customer will not be happy? Escalated cases. If you don't solve their cases, they might not be happy. If you don't solve their cases on time, they will not be happy. You have to select 2. Then you look at high priority cases. If they're high priority cases and they're escalated, you need to address them. Otherwise, the CSAT score will be low. Okay? So high priority escalated cases. Okay? Then a contact center manager is implementing a new customer care program and wants to specifically measure customer loyalty. How do you measure customer loyalty? How do you measure customer loyalty? You want to look for what they call the Net Promoter Score. Net Promoter Score. You want to look for customer satisfaction survey. And you want to look at something else. You want to look at even purchase history. If customer is loyal, they would come back to you. They will come back to you, okay? You want to look at the purchase history. You want to look at the NPS score, Net Promoter Score. If you're in the marketing, you know more about this, okay? It's very important in business, okay? And you want to look at the customer satisfaction survey, okay? In order to satisfy the internal enterprise security requirements, UC would like to conduct a disaster recovery and business continuity exercise with Salesforce. This would involve taking the production copy and making sure agents can work from the production copy until production is restored. The results of the exercise are provided to enterprise security as part of an annual audit. What should the consultant recommend to support this exercise? Use a developer pro, use a partial sandbox, allow exercise to be done in production, use a full copy sandbox. So you want to use a full copy sandbox, okay? You want to use a full copy sandbox for your disaster recovery. Disaster recovery is if something happens to your production, how do you back up? Remember, I showed you this. Do you know why we have 0 full copy for BlackForce? Because we don't have the license. Full copy is when you have a replica of your production. Partial is just a partial of your production. The developer, you don't even get a copy of your production, okay? So you want to use a full copy sandbox for your data recovery exercise, okay? The service manager at UC is concerned that users will not be able to manage cases in Service Console efficiently and reduce clicks. Which feature allows users to more efficiently process a case in Service Console? So I just literally look for all those questions under macros and I just gave it to you, okay? So the answer is configure macros, okay? Macros just enables, once you start saying reduce clicks, macro, okay? Reduce clicks, associated to macro. And the last question, there's no last question. That's the last question. I think that's all for our lesson today. I hope you guys learned something because whatever you've learned today is very crucial to your success as a consultant. So implementation strategies is very important, okay? And do you guys have any questions? Do you guys have any questions before we end the call for tonight? So if you have any questions, please, so I'll just call you according to how your hands are raised up, okay? If you've asked before, just drop it so I don't call you again. Please unmute yourself and speak.
Thank you very much, Babatope. Somewhat, the macros and the quick text, they do the same thing. I just want you to buttress on the distinguishing factor between these two features.
Okay, and that's a good question. They don't do the same thing. Try to understand. Macro helps you run a process without you touching the system. You run a macro, that's it. But quick test is, I want to, okay, let's say I have this case and I want to reply to the customer. I want to reply to the customer. And I say, hello, Eker, okay? Thank you for, no, actually, let me create a quick test before I use it. Quick test, new quick test, Babatope salutation. Okay? And I'll say, regards, Babatope mentor at Blackforce Inc. Close it, save. Okay? So now I have this quick test. I go to my case. I click on email. Eker has sent me an email saying blah, blah, blah. Then I say, hello, Eker. Okay? Or Eker, sorry about that. Okay? Thanks for reaching out to Blackforce. Then you type the email, blah, 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 blah. Then I can say regards, Babatope mentor at Blackforce. Can you see? I've spent 3 seconds or 4 seconds of my time to type this. But with quick tests, I just look for it, Babatope salutation, that's it. So I don't have to remember my salutation. My salutation is automatic based on quick tests. However, for macro, I want to send an email because I see that, oh, this is asking for next cohort. Oh, this is a typical next cohort. Run next cohort email on this case. That's it. Do you get? Quick tests give you opportunity to write your salutation, your pretest, or something that you think that you write very often. However, macros is to run a process. Okay? Macro can include quick tests or not. Run a process. Okay? I hope that helps you and it differentiates the quick test and macro.
Yes, very well. Thank you. So basically, or summarily, we could say that quick texts they're like subsets of macros. You could use them in the macro.
Yeah. You can do that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. I think that's all. I hope you guys learned something, and hopefully tomorrow we meet again and we discuss. Remember, we still have case management processes. We need to, everything we learned in our case in admin, we're going to learn it again, but with more of case study. And we have entitlement and milestone setup. We have to do another case study on that. We have knowledge management setup. We have omni-channel communication setup. We have so many things we have to do as a consultant. So when you're put into the hot seat, you know what to do, okay? I think that's all from me. Take care of yourself, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, everyone. Bye.